Israeli authorities have said that I think there's about 33 hostages that they feel they know to be dead. Well, that's 1/3 of the remaining hostages, and that's the ones they're fairly confident on. So that means that we hope that Ellie is one of the 60 or so live hostages, but there was information in the media, I think from a leak from the Americans, saying they think there's possibly less than 50 hostages left alive. So, the numbers keep coming down, and the bombings and fighting continue in Gaza. So there's always that risk there. And then there's the risk that we saw with the execution of the 6 hostages in the tunnels a few weeks back. If it's not friendly fire that kills the hostage, it could be a spooked terrorist, which is what we understand happened here. Was that the guards that were, the 2 terrorists that were guarding the 6 hostages were spooked by nearby IDF action, decided to make a run for it, and just executed the hostages before they went. And that's kind of the nightmare scenario that we've always feared, the sort of the panicked, trigger happy terrorists who are not, at the end of the day, they're not proper trained soldiers, and they're not bound by humanitarian law or the rules of engagement that prisoners of war would be, because they're not prisoners of war, they're hostages. Still remains the fact that last November is the one and only piece of information we had about him. There's been less from Hamas in terms of hostages. They obviously do all of their usual propaganda about how many soldiers they've killed each day, and videos of them blowing up tanks and things like that. But yeah, it's gone very quiet on the hostage side of things, and it's that thing of do you want a hostage video to come up or not? Because it might be a proof of life type of video, or it might be them with their psychological torture of here's a dead body. So it's always that you're always on the edge of, any time a video does come up on Telegram, you're not too sure whether you want it to be Ellie or not, because it depends on on how they're playing it, really. The escalation of the conflict in the Middle East, obviously it's incredibly important on a global basis, but from my point of view, I'm really interested in the hostages, and in particular getting Ellie out alive. So my concern is that global attention, Israeli attention, government attention is being moved towards Lebanon and now Iran, and so there is going to be even less focus on the hostages. The other more sort of pressing concern I have in terms of Ellie and the rest of the hostages is I fear that Hamas may start killing hostages in some sort of retribution for the attacks in Lebanon and Beirut. Iran have been fairly vocal in supporting Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis, and I wonder whether Hamas might want to make an example of some of the hostages to sort of say, well, for Israeli aggression against Iran, we're going to kill or torture hostages and release videos of it. And so I think that's my concern, is that there could be a very direct retribution cost for the hostages as a result of all the the various war fronts that are now going on in the Middle East. I think we are really reaching the point where all of this escalation has so many risks for the hostages from so many different directions, not least because I fear that the individual Hamas terrorists or the Hamas leadership may go, right, it's now to make an example of some of the hostages, and it's time for another video. We know how much Hamas revel in the psychological torture of hostage families. I mean, they could, we've consistently been asking for proof of life. We spoke to the Qatari ambassador in London on Monday, and I sort of said to him, it seems to me so incredibly cruel that aside from a ceasefire and hostage release deal, that there isn't some sort of proof of life deal. And if it's even more hostages are dead than we fear, it might get to the point there that the Israeli government will say, well, if there's only 20 hostages dead, then we're prepared to take that as collateral, and we're just gonna raise Gaza to the ground, and if the remaining hostages are collateral damage, then so be it. My concern is that Netanyahu's government has long considered the hostages to be collateral damage, and are willing to accept, well, originally 250 deaths, now, however many are left, that they would have been prepared to accept those as a fair enough trade for what they want to do on a wider basis. I'm still conscious that I still haven't really properly even come close to completing the sort of the grieving process and journey, because I think getting Ellie home, or in worst case scenario, at least getting Ellie's situation resolved, that's what I need to close the loop, to close that circle, and begin to the next chapter of really sort of dealing with things. Because I still don't know whether Ellie's going to come home and we're going to have to break the news to him that Leanne and the girls are dead. Ellie comes home that he knows that they're already dead, helping him to rebuild his life, or that Ellie is confirmed as dead and we bury him. Ellie's confirmed as dead and we don't have a body to bury. My fear is that we won't have that for Yossi and Ellie. Yossi's body still being there. Ellie, if he does end up not to survive, obviously that's the worst case scenario. But even worse is if we can't give them the dignified burial that they deserve. So I'm concerned that if I can't grieve properly for Yossi, I may not be able to grieve properly for Ellie if he doesn't come out of this, if his body doesn't come back.